Hello friends, today I am going to start with Derek Walcott's famous poem A Far Cry from Africa. A Far Cry from Africa by Derek Walcott deals with the theme of split identity and anxiety caused by it in the face of the struggle in which the poet could side with neither party. It is, in short, about the poet's ambivalent feelings towards the Kenyan terrorists and the white colonial government, both of which were inhuman and shedding bloods during the independence struggle of the country in 1950s. The persona, probably the poet himself, can take favor of none of them since both bloods circulated along his veins. So this is a famous fantastic poem written by Derek Walcott, and in this poem the poet tries to catch the dilemma. Before going to the text itself, let us know a few things about the poet himself. Sir Derek Alton Walcott was born on 23rd January 1930, died 17th March 2000, was a Saint Lucian poet and playwright. He received the 1992 Nobel Prize in Literature. He was the University of Alberta's first distinguished scholar in residence, where he taught undergraduate and graduate writing courses. He also served as the professor of poetry at the University of Essex from 2010 to 2013. His works include the Homeric epic poem Omeros 1990, which many critics view as Walcott's major achievement. In addition to winning the Nobel Prize, Walcott received many literary awards over the course of his career, including an Obie Award in 1971 for his play Dream on Monkey Mountain, a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award, a Royal Society of Literature Award, the Queen's Medal for Poetry, the inaugural O.C.M. Bocas Prize for Carribean Literature, the 2011 T.S. Eliot Prize for his book of poetry White Egrets, and the Griffin Trust for Excellence in Poetry Lifetime Recognition Award in 2015. So this famous poem and its poet needs a kind of greater attention. Before going to the text, let us know a few things about the poem. Derek Walcott's 1962 poem, A Far Cry from Africa, responds to the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, a guerrilla war fought by native Kenyans against British colonists from 1952 to 1960. This fact becomes apparent as soon as the speaker references the Kikuyu, the tribe that the Mau Mau fighters were from. The speaker, implied to be from a colony, just as Walcott himself was, has both African and English heritage. Although the speaker hates colonial rule, he also bristles against the gruesomeness of the rebellion, creating a feeling of deep ambivalence and confusion regarding his loyalties. Ultimately, the poem treats both the violence in Kenya and the speaker's own conflicted identity as part of the legacy of colonialism. Walcott has both African and European roots. His grandmothers were both black and both grandfathers were white. At the time the poem was written, the poet's country of birth, the island of St. Lucia, was still a colony of Great Britain. So rather than finding a way out of his legacy, the speaker expresses the deep pain it persistently causes. Title A Far Cry from Africa has multiple layers of meanings. The idiom a far cry means an impossible thing, but the poet seems to use the words in other senses also. The title suggested in one sense that the poet is writing about an African subject from a distance. Writing from the island of St. Lucia, he feels that he is at a vast distance, both literary and metaphorically, from Africa. So a far cry may also have another meaning, that the real state of the African paradise is a far cry from the Africa that we have read about in descriptions of gorgeous fauna and flora and interesting village customs, as in the pictures and in the descriptions. And a third level of meaning to the title is the idea of Walcott hearing the poem as a far cry coming all the way across thousands of miles of ocean. He hears the cry coming to him on the wind. Let us start the text. A wind is ruffling the tawny pelt of Africa. Kiku, quick as flies, batten upon the bloodstreams of the veldt. This is the beginning of the poem. A wind is ruffling. প্রথমে এই পার্সনিফিকেশন করা হয়েছে উইন্ডকে, এবং অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম দ্য উইন্ড ইজ মেটাফরিক্যালি প্রেজেন্টেড। একটা তুলনা করা হয়েছে আফ্রিকাকে যেন একটা পশুর সঙ্গে তুলনা করা হচ্ছে, তার টনি পেল্টকে যেন উড়িয়ে দিচ্ছে। টনি পেল্ট মানে ধূসর হলুদাভ রঙের ফার, ইয়েলো ব্রাউন ফার, অর্থাৎ আফ্রিকা যেন এখানে লায়ন বা এই জাতীয় কোনো হিংস্র পশু, তার যে ইয়েলো ব্রাউন ফার তাকে উড়াচ্ছে একটা বাতাস। ইট ব্রিংস আউট দ্য অ্যানিম্যাল ইমেজারি that live in that environment, such as lions. Africa has been metaphorically compared to lion or something like that. At a more abstract level, this image also comments on human affairs. Something is happening in Africa, a disturbance that the speaker will soon implicitly reveal to be the Mau Mau rebellion. Mau Mau যে আন্দোলন হচ্ছে তার একটা আগাম যেন তিনি বলছেন, এ উইন্ড ইজ রাফলিং। রাফলিং মানে আন্দোলিত করে দিচ্ছে, দুলিয়ে দিচ্ছে, উড়িয়ে দিচ্ছে। টনি পেল্ট, ধূসর রঙের, হলুদাভ রঙের, বাদামি রঙের ফারগুলোকে, অর্থাৎ আফ্রিকাকে এখানে যেন সিংহের সঙ্গে তুলনা করা হচ্ছে মেটাফরিক্যালি। কিকু, কুইক অ্যাজ ফ্লাইজ, ব্যাটেন আপন দ্য ব্লাড স্ট্রিমস অফ দ্য ভেল্ট। কিকু, the term Kiku comes from Giku, the Kikuyu land situated on central province in Kenya. The people, those who are in Kiku, is called Kikuyu people. They have their own Kiku language also. They are quick as flies. Here is a figure of speech used as simile. The simile figure of speech is used here. যাদেরকে দ্রুত মাছির সঙ্গে তুলনা করা হচ্ছে কিকু লোকেদের। এটা একটা উপজাতির লোকেরা। Kikuyu are the tribe that the Mau Mau or Kenya Land and Freedom Army KLFA came from. Rather than fighting the British Army head on, the Mau Mau or the Kikuyan people mostly engaged in surprise attacks at night, often targeting with killing the white settlers instead of the army. So কিকুর সঙ্গে এই মাও মাও যে আন্দোলন তার একটা সম্পর্ক রয়েছে। সেই কিকু লোকেরা অর্থাৎ মাও মাও রিবেলিয়ান্সরা তারা ব্যাটন আপন দ্য ব্লাড স্ট্রিমস অফ দ্য ভেল্ট। ভেল্ট বলতে এই গ্রাসল্যান্ডকে ভেল্ট বলা হয়েছে, এটাকে তুলনা করা হচ্ছে আফ্রিকান ল্যান্ডের সঙ্গে, এই ভেল্টের তুলনা করা হয়েছে। তারা যেন পুষ্টি লাভ করছে, কারা না কিকু, যারা মাছির মতো দ্রুত এক জায়গা থেকে অন্য জায়গায় ঘুরে বেড়ায়। তারা আসলে গেরিলা যুদ্ধের সঙ্গে যুক্ত বলে তাদেরকে কুইক এই টার্মটি অ্যাডজেক্টিভটি ব্যবহার করা হয়েছে, কুইক অ্যাজ ফ্লাইজ, ব্যাটন আপন দ্য ব্লাড স্ট্রিমস অফ দ্য ভেল্ট। So the description here seems to channel the bloodiness of those attacks done by Mau Mau rebels. Batten means also mean lockdown, and blood streams refers to veins. Veins, sirake বোঝাচ্ছে, and veld refers to African grassland. In this intensely metaphorical description, the grassland has veins that the Kiku as flies attach themselves to. মাছির মতো কিকুরা যেন এই ব্লাড স্ট্রিমের উপর বসছে। This description has parasitic connotations, suggesting at the very least how flies often hover around the dead bodies. মাছিরা কিভাবে মৃতদেহের চারপাশে ঘুরে বেড়ায় এবং রক্ত চুষে তাই বোঝাচ্ছে। So by metaphorically transforming people of the Kiku tribe into flies, the speaker, perhaps the poet, is able to use his description of the natural world as means of commenting on human affairs. Such descriptions can also be thought as a form of metonymy. This description can be thought as a metonymical description in which the landscape adjacent to human events comes to stand for these events. So the veld means the grassland, the area, Africa. The speaker conveys a deep ambiguity about the Mau Mau here. Although later in the poem the speaker displays clear hatred for colonization that does not translate to automatic sympathy for the Mau Mau. Right off the bat, there's a feeling that violence transforms people into creatures of death. That violence, at least for the speaker, makes it hard to keep viewing people as humans. They are flies as if they are not people, but they are flies. Jano tara machi, jano tara creatures. In fact, this description foreshadows the speaker's later description of the Mau Mau as delirious, as worried beasts. All this to say, the speaker is deeply suspicious and critical of the Mau Mau, though in the very beginning of the text. Corpses are scattered through a paradise, but still the worm, Colonial of Carribean, cries, waste no compassion on these separate dead. Statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. What is that to the white child hacked in bed, to savages expendable as Jews? Corpses মানে মৃতদেহগুলো আর scattered ছড়িয়ে ছিটিয়ে রয়েছে, littered through a paradise. So dead bodies as attacked by the Kiku people or Mau Mau rebels are scattered, means littered in this beautiful landscape which is called paradise. Africa is considered to be a paradise, but ironically it is not paradise but a hell of dead bodies. So corpses are scattered, littered, but still the worm, Colonial of Carrion, Carrion means rotten meat or husk, পচা মাংসের, Colonial, এই Colonial শব্দটাই পান ব্যবহার করা রয়েছে এবং এখানে অ্যালিটারেশনও ব্যবহার রয়েছে, Colonial of Carrion, অ্যালিটারেশন অলংকার রয়েছে, এবং Colonial has also the use of colonial. Cries, waste no compassion on these separate dead. এই আলাদা আলাদা থাকা মৃতদেহগুলোর প্রতি সহানুভূতি দেখিয়ে অপচয় করো না। The personified worm, actually made military, has a cruel message for the world. What is the use of compassion for those already dead? মৃতদের প্রতি সহানুভূতি দেখিয়ে কি হবে? Waste no compassion on these separate dead. The suggestion being that where you find rotten flesh, you find worms. যেখানে পচা মাংস, পচা ডেড বডি থাকবে, সেখানে এই পোকা থাকবে। He personifies them though and gives them an almost militant voice as they claim, waste no compassion on these separate dead. This gives a kind of villainous quality, and human are no human now. They are bestial. They have become ferocious, violent, and villain. So the Mau Mau rebellion is highly criticized by the poet. Statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. In the 8th line, he refers to the locals as salient. This is a clever piece of imagery. It gives the impression that these people are isolated. It also has a double meaning with military connotations also. So statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. What is that to the white child hacked in bed? So this is the violent attack, guerrilla attack, and the very mass killing done by the Mau Mau. Officialdom backs up its policies with numbers. Academics point out the relevant facts and figures. But what do these mean when you consider the human cost? কত মরলো, কত গেল, এই হিসাব নিকাশে তখন কি যায় আসে? Where is the humanity in all this? So the poet is highly concerned about the loss of human lives. What is that to the white child hacked in bed? যে শিশু, যে সাদা চামড়ার শিশু, ব্রিটিশ শিশু, বিছানায় তাকে হত্যা করা হয়েছে। to savages expendable as Jews, এখানে অ্যালিউশন রয়েছে। এই জিউসদের রেফারেন্স নিয়ে এসে এটা অ্যালিউশন একটা অলংকার ব্যবহার করা হয়েছে। It alludes to the Jews, reflects the atrocities perpetrated by the Nazis in Second World War. The point the poet is trying to make is how the colonials use their data and skew facts in order to portray the KQ as savages. How the statistics and the descriptions of the scholars actually justify the colonial policies. They present the KQ as savage because they hack the white child in bed. Because they hack the white child in bed. Of course, this does not tell us the full story. This section is laden with irony, maybe even dramatic irony, as an informed reader would realize that these views are not an accurate description of the issues that have existed in Africa. Because statistics and scholars can try to justify the colonial policy, but the actual fact was different. And the poet is going to say that in the latter part. এবং এই যে জিউজদের রেফারেন্স নিয়ে এসে যাদেরকে নির্বিচারে হত্যা করা হয়েছিল, এই মাও রেফারেন্সের সঙ্গে একটা অ্যালিউশন এবং মিল মেটাফরিক্যালি কবি কিন্তু আঁকতে চেয়েছেন। So in this section, Walcott shatters the image of a paradise that many associate with Africa by describing a landscape littered with corpses. He adds a sickening detail by referring to a worm or maggot that reigns in this setting of decaying human flesh. The worm is the worm's demonizement to waste no compassion on these separate dead is puzzling in that it implies that the victims somehow got what they deserved. The mention of the words justify and colonial policy, when taken in context with the preceding 6 lines, finally clarified the exact event that Walcott is describing, the Mau Mau uprising against the British colonists in Kenya during the 1950s. Where earlier the speaker seemed to blame the victims, he now blames those who forced the colonial system into Kenya and polarized the population. They cannot justify their actions because their reasons will never matter to the white child who has been murdered merely because of his color in retaliation by Mau Mau fighters, or to the savages who, in as racist an attitude as was taken by Nazis against the Jews, are deemed worthless or expendable. Savages is a controversial term that derives from the French word sauvage, meaning wild, and is now wholly derogatory in English. Walcott's use of savage functions to present a British colonialist's racist point of view. Now the second part of the poem. Thrashed out by beaters, the long rushes break in a white dust of ibises whose cries have wheeled since civilization's dawn from the parched river or beast teeming plain. Thrashed out means cleaned out. যখন তাড়িত হয় কাদের দ্বারা? না, বিটার্সদের দ্বারা। বিটার্স হচ্ছে যারা ড্রাম নিয়ে বা বড় লাঠি নিয়ে বড় বড় জঙ্গলের ভিতরে বা ঝোপের ভিতরে যারা আঘাত করে এবং সেখান থেকে জন্তু জানোয়ার পাখিরা সব খোলা জায়গায় বেরিয়ে যায়, এবং এটা আফ্রিকান কনটেক্সটে একটা পরিচিত বিগ গেম অফ হান্ট। দ্য লং রাসেস ব্রেক ইন এ হোয়াইট ডাস্ট, যখন ঝোপঝাড় থেকে পশুরা যখন বেরিয়ে পড়ে এবং ইবিসরাও বেরিয়ে পড়ে। অ্যাকচুয়ালি দ্য ইবিস ইজ অ্যান আইকনিক ওয়েডিং বার্ড উইথ এ স্পেশাল কল and has been a part of the African landscape since humans first used tools. অনেক পুরনো এক পাখি ইবিস, এবং যার whose cries have wheeled since civilization's dawn. So this is an ironic use of the word civilization from the parched river. Parched rivers means dried river, শুকনো নদীর কাছ থেকে, or beast teeming plain অথবা পশু পরিপূর্ণ beast filled land থেকে যখন বেরিয়ে পড়ে। Actually this is a metaphor for the repeated slaughter and genocide of civilizations, highlighting that this is an issue that has been prominent throughout the history of mankind. It is a particular event, yes, but the genocide, the killing, the very bestial activities are as if remaining in the history of mankind. The very opening 4 lines of this stanza paint a detailed picture of the typical hunt. Hunt means a big game which was very common in the African context, carried out by colonials and settlers. This hunt was being done. Beaters use sticks and they shout as they score the undergrowth or the very bushes or rushes and drive out the animals into the open where they will be shot. The violence of a beast on beast is read as natural law, but upright man seeks his divinity with inflicting pain. So these lines seem to reinforce the idea that in the animal kingdom, evolution dictates who wins and loses through the pure kind of violence. So violence is the only law. Violence of beast on beast is read as a natural law. So this is the natural law of survival. Walcott uses repetition of the word beast here in order to cement his comparison. The suggestion here is then that the men that carry out the atrocities may as well be animals. He then goes on to attack religion by suggesting that the upright man seeks his divinity with inflicting pain. Delirious as these worried beasts, his horse danced to the tightened carcass of a drum, while he calls courage still that native dread of the white peace contracted by the dead. A apparently ambiguous lines গুলোর দ্বারা একটা imagery কবি আঁকতে চেয়েছেন. Delirious as these worried beasts. Animals actually kill merely for food and survival, but humans, having perfected the skill of hunting for food, extend that violent act to the other areas, using force to exert control and prove superiority over other people. They seek divinity by deciding who lives and who dies ironically. Wars between people are described as following the beat of a drum, and his horse danced to the tightened carcass of a drum, an instrument made of an animal hide stretched over the cylinder. Also, it points out that for whites historically, peace has not been the result of compromise with an opponent, but a situation arrived at because the opposition has been crushed and cannot resist. So delirious, and it is not clear who the person is, who he is. It is not totally clear. Delirious as these worried beasts, his horse danced to the tightened carcass of a drum. But it is supposed that his horse may represent mankind. He may here represent mankind. Delirious as these worried beasts, his horse danced to the tightened carcass. Fantastic phrase. শক্ত করে বাঁধা পশুর মৃতদেহের যে drum, while he calls courage still that native dread of the white peace contracted by the dead. These words are pretty in the sense they uplift the poet's idea of savageness and violence. As they are described as delirious, delirious means crazy, mad. And once again we see the word beast employed here, worried beast. There is once again the use of graphic description of using words like carcass and dread here help to convey the dark and grim tone. There is a lovely piece of workmanship here as Walcott uses the phrase white peace. This is used almost as an oxymoron, as the peace he is describing is born of the multiple destructions and deaths of the white peace contracted by the dead. ফলে মৃতদের সাথে চুক্তির ফলে সাদা শান্তি এসেছে. Just another example of the strong use of irony throughout the poem. Again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of a dirty cause. Again, a waste of our compassion, as with Spain, the gorilla wrestles with the Superman. The personification of brutish necessity. Again, the brutish means the savage necessity. It is personified as it wipes its hands on a napkin. গামছায় হাত মুছে নেয় যখন brutish necessity হাত মুছে নেয়. It is an interesting narrative device. Napkins are usually white, but the cause is dirty. That is, the colonial settlement alongside is injustice. Again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of a dirty cause. Again, a waste of our compassion, as with Spain. So, by repeating what the worm cries in the first stanza, a waste of our compassion, the speaker is bringing extra weight to the idea of meaninglessness in death. Compassion cannot alter the circumstances. By using our compassion, the speaker is implying compassion of the world or of those who are African or black. A waste of our compassion, as with Spain. And what has Spain to do with colonial Kenya? Well, it seems that violent struggle is not just limited to the continent of Africa. It can happen in Europe too, as with the Spanish Civil War, which was in 1936 to 1939, which was fought between democratic republicans and fascists. A waste of our compassion, as with Spain, the gorilla wrestles with the Superman. The opening 4 lines of this last stanza juxtapose historical references with a visual here and now embodied in gorilla and Superman. Metaphor is used fantastically here. It is so thinly veiled as to almost be constructed as sarcastic. These lines are most important part of the poem. They appear to be aimed at those judging the Mau Mau uprising from a distance, observes who could somehow accept brutality as necessary and who are aware of a dire situation but wipe their hands upon the napkin or refuse to become involved in it. The poet appears to condemn such an attitude by comparing the Mau Mau uprising to the Spanish Civil War 1936 to 1939. Leaders of France and Great Britain wanted to avoid another war that would engulf all of Europe, so they introduced a non-intervention pact that was signed by 27 nations. Nevertheless, the insurgents, what was in Spanish Civil War, the nationalists under the leadership of General Francisco Franco were aided by and received military aid from Germany and Italy. On the other hand, the loyalists or the republicans had no such backing. They fought valiantly but were outmanned, lost territory and were eventually defeated on March in 1939. So, যারা দূর থেকে দাঁড়িয়ে এরকম হাত মুছে ফেলে এবং তারা একটা মন্তব্য করে মাও মাও আপরাইজিংকে স্প্যানিশ সিভিল ওয়ারের সঙ্গে তুলনা করে, তাদের এই অ্যাটিটিউডটা ঠিক নয় বলে কবি বলছেন। Finally, presenting a cynical view of the Mau Mau uprising as just another colonial conflict where gorillas negatively animalized Africans, কারণ আফ্রিকানদের গরিলার সঙ্গে তুলনা করা হচ্ছে, fight with Superman. Superman means a negative characterization of Europe. কবি দুটো পক্ষকেই কিন্তু এখানে সমালোচনা করেছেন। প্রথমে মাও মাও কিকু পিপল, যারা কিনা কুইক অ্যাজ ফ্লাইজ, যারা কিনা এইভাবে রক্ত ব্লাড স্ট্রিম ছড়াচ্ছে ভেল্টে, তাদেরকে যেমন সমালোচনা করেছেন, এই ল্যাটার পার্টে এসে তিনি কিন্তু এই কলোনিয়ালসদের নেগেটিভ ক্যারেক্টারাইজেশন করছেন ইউরোপের, যাদেরকে সুপারম্যানের সঙ্গে তুলনা করছে। ফলে সুপারম্যানের সঙ্গে এই গরিলার যুদ্ধ দুতরফেরই ক্ষতি ডেকে আনবে, ভয়াবহ মৃত্যু ডেকে আনবে। I who am poisoned with the blood of both, where shall I turn, divided to the vein? I who have cast the drunken officer of British rule, how choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love? এখন কবি প্রশ্ন তুলছেন। In line 26, the speaker declares a personal involvement for the first time. এখন কবি মাও মাও আপরাইজিং থেকে হোয়াইট এবং ব্ল্যাক যে রেসিস্ট মুভমেন্ট থেকে সরাসরি নিজের জায়গায় এখন চলে এসেছেন। And acknowledging the fact that he is divided because his blood ties in both camps, the use of the word poisoned suggests to the reader that the speaker is not too happy with his situation, which he deems toxic. তিনি বলছেন who am poisoned with the blood of both, কারণ যে পক্ষেরই লস হোক না কেন তার রক্তের সঙ্গে মিশে রয়েছে তাদের সঙ্গে সম্পর্ক। ফলে তিনি মনে করছেন I who am poisoned with the blood of both. So the change of scene from primarily that of Africa to that of the poet being a product of both African and English heritage, is torn because he does not know how to feel about the Mau Mau struggle. He certainly is not satisfied with the stock response of those from outside. Walcott is sickened by the behavior of Mau Mau just as he has been disgusted by the British. So that's why he questions, where shall I turn? আমি কোন দিকে ঝুঁকবো, কোন দিকে ফিরবো? Divided to the vein. He wants to side with the oppressed, but cannot reconcile the fact that the language of the oppressor is the same one he uses to speak, write and live by. তিনি যে ভাষায় কথা বলেন, যে ভাষাতে বেঁচে রয়েছেন, যে ভাষায় লেখেন, সেই ভাষাটা হচ্ছে অপ্রেসারদের ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ। সো কোন পক্ষে তিনি নেবেন? either he will go to the oppressed or he will go with the oppressor. I who have cursed, এবং তিনি যে সমস্ত শব্দগুলো এখানে ইউজ করেছেন, the dramatic language used by the poet actually heightens the tension that he is feeling because of his divided self. Brutish, dirty, restless, poisoned, cursed, drunken, betray, slaughter, এই সমস্ত শব্দগুলো তার যে ইন্টারনাল টেনশন এন্ড স্ট্রাগল সেটাকে ইন্ডিকেট করছে। The drunken officer of British rule, how choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love, যে ইংরেজি ভাষাকে আমি ভালোবাসি। Betray them both or give back what they give. How shall I face such slaughter and be cool? কেমন করে আমি এই হত্যালীলাকে মুখোমুখি হব, হত্যালীলার, এবং শান্ত থাকবো? অর্থাৎ তিনি শান্ত থাকতে পারছেন না। So this is a kind of a series of heart-wrenching questions. A series of heart-wrenching questions are not or cannot be answered by anyone. And at last he questions, how can I turn from Africa and live? So the final section of the poem really brings us to the crux of the entire poem. The poet struggles to deal with the lineage he has and his association between that lineage and the atrocities carried out by those nations. By the same token, he is torn as he clearly has an affection for the language of his mother tongue. So he cannot turn from Africa and live. The bloody conflict, the deaths, the subjugation, the cruelty, the need for domination all reflect the dilemma for the speaker. He feels estranged yet a part of African heritage. He feels a love for the language of the British, who are the cause of such strife in the tribal lands. By the end, the poet's dilemma is not reconciled. But one gets the sense that the poet will abandon neither Africa nor Britain, because he has both the blood of the both. Perhaps the final irony is that by the very act of writing and publishing such a poem and ending it with a question about turning away from Africa, the speaker somehow provides his own answer in his own way. In the poem, A Far Cry from Africa, the poet ironically describes how he rejects the British culture and the colonial ideology. The poem A Far Cry from Africa belongs to post-colonial poetry. Mainly, the poem discusses the events of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in the early 1950s. It was a bloody battle during the 1950 between the European settlers and the native Kiku tribe in Kenya. Kiku was the largest and most educated tribe in Kenya. As the British people invaded more and more, their land were outrageously reacted. The Kenyan tribes rebelled against the British, who stole the motherland of them. The rebellion was under a secret organization called Mau Mau. It is estimated a large number of Kiku as well as whites were slaughtered during the process. The poet has been given an English tongue which he loves on the one hand, and on the other he cannot tolerate the brutal slaughter of Africans with whom he shares blood and some traditions. His conscience forbids him to favor injustice. He is in the state of indecisiveness, troubled, wishing to see peace and harmony in the region. The Africans, associated with a primitive natural strength, and the British, portrayed as an artificially enhanced power, remain equal in the contest for control over Africa and its people. Walcott's divided loyalties engender a sense of guilt as he wants to adopt the civilized culture of the British but cannot excuse their immoral treatment of the Africans. The poem reveals the extent of the poet's consternation through the poet's inability to resolve the paradox of his hybrid inheritance. So friends, I hope you have a bit of understanding about the poem. So please share, comment, and if you are new to this channel, please subscribe. Thank you.